debate. I want to give thanks to Almighty God for continuing to bless me in so many ways, and though he continues to slay me in different areas, I will trust him, Madam Speaker. I'm grateful to the people of St. Barnabas, namely the communities of Coconut Grove, Big Pond, Black Village, Rock Crusher, and Oaksfield, for their constant confidence and support, and just continuing to believe in my capacity to serve them and to bring, as best as I can, real change to their lives, though not always perfect, Madam Speaker. But I just hope that when it is said and done, the good that I do, whether in St. Barnabas or throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, will outweigh the bad. Madam Speaker, before I get into the budget itself, Madam Speaker, I do want to remind the constituents of St. Barnabas that we do have our continuing education classes going on at the computer lab, so you're able to sign up for the intro to computer classes that we are continuing, as well as to remind the senior citizens in the constituency that we continue to have our senior citizens program where we are able to transport them to the various errands that they run on a weekly basis, whether it be the clinic or to the bank or to do something at NIB. We continue to be here for you. It is said that service is the rent. We pay God for our space on earth, so I will continue to pay the rent, Madam Speaker, because as it is well known, only what you do for Christ will last. Madam Speaker, you know, these budget debates are sometimes utterly amazing. And as I get in, I do want to congratulate the member for Marco City, who has been re-elected leader of the Free National Movement, Madam Speaker, and I would venture to say will be the next Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in not so distant future. Y'all should rap on that, because we used to be just like y'all. They used to be right over there. Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, they used to be here, sorry.
They used to be here.
They used to be here, you know? We used to be here, sorry.
Sorry,
yeah.
And they used to be
here. Yeah. And they used to say, you know, they always used to say, you know, it wasn't long now. And we used to say, it ain't gonna happen. So just as an admonishment, just be careful, you know? Just be careful. And be nice to the member for Marco City, you know? Be very nice to the member for Marco City. Be very nice. But Madam Speaker, on that same note, Madam Speaker, on that same note, and I don't intend to be presumptuous here, or to seem like I'm being presumptuous, because I can't tell anybody or guess what they may do next. But the Member of Parliament for Kalani, do want to thank him for his service as leader of the Free National Movement. Want to thank him for his service as the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As I said, I'm not going to opine on what may be next, but I think that in this moment, because service is profoundly important to our national development, and once we strip aside our politics, the very important thing, Madam Speaker, is that we're all here to serve our people. And the truth is, Madam Speaker, you know, the realities of national politics is in fact this, that sometimes, oftentimes, history will have to be the ultimate judge of your tenure as a Member of Parliament or as the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I say that because sometimes in an election, an issue or issues that can cause you to lose an election will be viewed and evaluated a different way, years, maybe even decades down the road. And that's why ultimately all we can do is you do your best, make the best decisions that you feel. And while in the moment those who elect us and have the right to kick us out of office when they choose to, because the power is with the people, ultimately, those persons and even history may look back 5, 10 years and say that decision that was made by an honorable member or a former prime minister. I think about the election when they say the roads them dig up. And many people would say consequently that cost the Free National Movement the election. But years later, the Bahamian people are enjoying the functionality of those roads and the benefits of those roads. And I'm sure if you spoke to the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Hubert Ingraham, and if you ask him if he would do it again, he would do it again. He might make some adjustments relative to how it was communicated. The point I'm just making is that ultimately, history will continue to be the judge of all of our legacies, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've heard so many things in this debate so far, Madam Speaker, that just, it really boggles my mind, Madam Speaker. You know, the government has a view of what is going on in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and they stroke themselves to death and continue to drink the Kool-Aid of what they believe is happening in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and what they believe the Bahamian people are feeling, Madam Speaker. But oh, as we know, really, what history is showing, what a government thinks is happening for the people and what the Bahamian people are feeling, the disparity is great. And in this case, nothing has changed, Madam Speaker. Because this government believes, as Mama would say, that they are the best thing since sliced bread. But the Bahamian people have been complaining, struggling about the many issues that they deal with every day because of the decisions of this new day government, decisions that they have made relative to policies, decisions they have made in response to different national occurrences that have happened, and they have determined that this government is failing them in many regards, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our country's budget is only as effective and impactful as its ability to address the critical fiscal, social, economic, national security, national health, and educational issues facing our people. It should also carve out a vision of prosperity and the prospects of a better future for the poor, for the Bahamian worker, the Bahamian businessman, for the next generation of Bahamians. Our government's policies and decisions directly affect the lives of the Bahamian people, not just F&Ms, Madam Speaker, but PLPs and independents too. So, Madam Speaker, let the word go out today that we find no fault with PLP supporters in the Free National Movement. This leadership finds no fault with PLP supporters. They are suffering too, because bad policies and bad decisions affect everyone, Madam Speaker. The member for Exuma proclaimed this morning that the Bahamian people are feeling it. And you heard all the rapping on the table, yay! The Bahamian people are feeling it all right, Madam Speaker. The people in Grand Bahama are feeling frustrated that the member for Exuma has failed them on the sale of the Grand Lucayan after promises, after promises, after promises. But the government has the heart to talk about Grand Bahama. The people of Eleuthera are feeling angry, Madam Speaker, as they contend with constant electricity outages and no water. I said it again. The people of Eleuthera are feeling angry and frustrated as they contend with constant electricity outages and no water. And to the member for Central and South Eleuthera's credit, in 2022, he drafted a letter to complain to his own government about what his constituents have been going through. In 2022, and it's now 2024, and they still have not fixed it. Madam Speaker, the unions are feeling it. They're angry, betrayed as this government, as they have said, the government is not honoring the industrial agreements. Their words, Madam Speaker. Government not honoring industrial agreements. This is from the President of the Trade Union Congress, O.B. Ferguson, KC. And I read into the hearing, Madam Speaker, Tribune article. What's happening now, this is Mr. Ferguson, is that some of the agreements are signed but are not being honored. We have signed agreements with the relevant government department is not honoring the terms of the agreement. We have the air traffic controllers, for example. BPL, for example. This is O.B. Ferguson. We have the agreement in Grand Bahama with the Grand Lucayan Renewal Holdings. We have an agreement which is completed, but it's not executed. We have the nurses union, the doctors union, practically all the unions. The ones that they have agreed, they're not honoring them. Wow. And the ones we have completed, they're not prepared to have the agreement executed. Shame, Madam Speaker, but the government gets up in here, talks about the 20 agreements signed and how they are champions for labor. See, but this is consistent with the government. Don't watch what they say, you watch what they do. Government not honoring industrial agreements. President of the Trade Union Congress, KC. Madam Speaker. Yeah, I have a number of these, Madam Speaker. I will table all these. I have about. The driving public is feeling it, Madam Speaker, as they drive past the new road traffic department, as congestion deters their everyday travel. The area needs better management on the Tonic-Williams-Darling Highway. Bahamians are complaining as you drive out there now, it's back-to-back traffic on that part of the highway. So something needs to be done. But the member for Exuma says that Bahamians are feeling it. The police reservists are feeling it, Madam Speaker, as they continue to complain that monies that are owed to them from almost 2 years ago. Month after month, I stood here to let the member for Freetown know what I have been hearing from police reservists relative to their compensation or lack thereof. And I'm sure that this Parliament will remember when I brought it to the attention of the House, the member for Freetown said that reservists doesn't come under his remit. The Minister of National Security said that the police reservist doesn't come to his remit. Go talk to the commissioner. Yeah, they're feeling it. They're feeling angry and frustrated, Madam Speaker. Neglected. They're feeling the increase in business license fees. They're feeling frustrated at customs fees. They're feeling it. National insurance fees, Madam Speaker. Boat license fees. Passenger taxes, Madam Speaker. The cost of electricity. Raising VAT on bread basket items. And medication, Madam Speaker. We told them how important that was, Madam Speaker. Raising fees on air freight costs. But what the comments of the honourable member for Exuma continues to show us, that what remains true is that there are two worlds. The political fantasy one this government lives in, and the real world that the average Bahamian lives in. We would encourage the Minister of Works to make sure and build a bridge. He probably should build a bridge and allow the government to come over that bridge into the real world that the Bahamian people are living in, Madam Speaker. By their own words, Madam Speaker, their own standards, their own acknowledgement, they are failing, Madam Speaker. This has been a lazy, target missing, all over the place, say one thing, do the next government. A penal government, Madam Speaker, a business hurting government. This government is unfocused despite what they say. This government is in constant conflict with itself, Madam Speaker, oftentimes tripping over themselves on major policy decisions, sometimes even in the same day, Madam Speaker, in the same day, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I'm going to table all these.
Y'all ain't gonna read it in any event.
The government said they are not concerned, that they are not concerned that crime, they're concerned that crime will not, they are not concerned that crime will impact tourism, Madam Speaker. And then they say, Cooper warns that rising crime could also impact tourism. Same person, same government, talking out the two sides of their government mouths, shame. Madam Speaker.
Shame.
Madam Speaker, there's more, Madam Speaker, more. In the same breath, when the government, or some people in the government said, the cruise port that was an F&M initiative was the worst deal ever. Told the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that it's the worst deal ever.
Shame.
In history. And then the Deputy Prime Minister praises the cruise port. Parts of the government say worst deal ever for the Bahamian people. And then other members, including the Prime Minister, talks about all of the benefits that the Bahamian people have enjoyed because of the port.
See the confusion again.
Confusion again. They still mix up, Madam Speaker. Right now, they're trying to figure out how they deal with this. They still mix up, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on NIB, you remember when the good member for Pinewood was really, good man, was projecting from 2022 that the increase in contributions is unavoidable. Gave the actuarial report, say it's unavoidable. Right after that, they say, no, despite what the good member said, that ain't coming soon. Say it ain't coming soon. And then,
moments later,
then the member for Fort Charlotte came in to present the policy initiative, the decision of the increase in contributions, not only for July 1st of this year, but he projected till 2044.
20 years.
2044. And before he could finish his contribution that day, the office of the Prime Minister sends out a statement, hey, listen, what you all hear Minister says, say it ain't like that.
No.
Confused, I say, Madam Speaker, confused.
Conflict.
This is a government that once promised free electricity. This is a government that promised free electricity. Free electricity. But are responsible for higher electricity bills Bahamians are experiencing. This is a government, Madam Speaker, that had murder numbers on billboards around the island, but now does not have answers on crime, but criticize when the Bahamian people ask for answers. We believe that they should have criticized the government. We just have a problem with the signs they put up.
Yes.
That's what we are saying. So we will continue to ask the government to come up with a plan, but we have made the determination that we are not going to put up billboards like they did.
No.
But we will continue to ask them questions, Madam Speaker. I heard the phrase earlier, we different, you know.
Yeah, very much so.
We different. We ain't gonna do that. We ain't gonna put them on the billboards, you know. And besides, that's in the past, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member for Freetown on crime policy was staunchly against the Swift Justice Program. He was staunchly against the Swift Justice Program before he was for it. Confused, Madam Speaker. Confused. Confused, Madam Speaker.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Just so that we understand, because I don't intend to make this long, I'll speak at length tomorrow. If he says there are two positions, if he could tell the country and present it, because they have the articles, present them, table them, we'll read them and we'll deal with them. But at the moment he's saying something that it appears to be inaccurate on the face of it.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, you know one thing. Anyway, I ain't gonna say that. Stay focused, right?
Position here like that.
August 18, 2011, Madam Speaker, this when the honorable member, he was with that other party, the DNA.
Yeah, read that.
Right, okay?
Read that.
Mr. Monroe also takes aim at the PLP's plan to reintroduce swift justice. Mr. Monroe also takes aim at the PLP's plan to reintroduce swift justice, saying that the swift justice initiative is nothing more than plain regurgitation of a program/system that had no track record of success.
My.
Yeah. But he says, 2023, that he believes that the program will help address the ongoing issue with the backlog of court cases. Confused, Madam Speaker, confused.
Where a man stand depends on where he sits.
Confused, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a government, Madam Speaker, that called taxing lazy. And now they are viewed by the people as the most taxing, fee-increasing government in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker.
Get him some water. He on fire.
Madam Speaker,
You need more water.
here it is, Madam Speaker. Only lazy minds raise taxes to increase revenue. Only lazy minds increase taxes to increase revenue. So it's a lazy government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, hold on. I know you're a little edgy right now. I know you're a little edgy right now. I know you're really edgy right now. Davis. Okay, well, check the Tribune article then. Davis has said only lazy minds raise taxes to increase revenue. You know, right? No. Madam Speaker, this is a government that's not even sure of its own identity as their members scramble between calling themselves the Davis administration or the Davis-Cooper administration, Cooper-Davis administration, sometimes even confused, Madam Speaker, about who the Prime Minister is. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition and I, we were at an official function, Madam Speaker. We couldn't believe it. The member for Freetown called Exuma the Prime Minister 3 times in 3 minutes. But maybe he knows something we don't know. Maybe because the member for Exuma has been acting. Must be because the member has been acting for so long. I don't know.
For Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I think Sesame Street used to be over at this time when I was young. But the member for St. Barnabas, I'm not sure he was there at a passing out ceremony for the Rangers when Angliston was Prime Minister. You see on this side, Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador trusts his people for there to be other prime ministers. Kalani never did. And so for the edification of Bahamian people, there is always a prime minister in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and it's designated by the Governor General. There's always a minister here. And so, Madam Speaker, the only persons who don't get that honor possibly is the Speaker, because you're a separate member of the thing. But I know the one person I have no danger of calling Prime Minister within the next decade.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, you know, Madam Speaker, this is a serious exercise. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, no.
I didn't mean to do that, Madam Speaker. Because it's a good member over there. Yeah. But maybe it was aspirational.
Yeah,
maybe
aspirational.
Maybe it was aspirational. Maybe he got some pom-poms underneath their rooting. You know, Madam Speaker. But I wish that the Prime Minister was in the chamber, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. But Prime Minister, I hope somebody tells you this. We on this side know that this is the Davis administration. we understand that this is your administration, sir. It's just that some of your members seem to be confused. This is a government, Madam Speaker, that continues to fail the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, this government has mixed priorities. What government would reallocate funds from all places, from the blind and the deaf and the handicapped, Madam Speaker, in their reallocation of funds? From the blind, the deaf, and the handicapped. Don't watch what they say.
Right.
Just watch what they do, Madam Speaker. A government is supposed to govern in the present and govern for the future. This government lives in the past and gives excuses of why it cannot govern now. Many of their excuses, Madam Speaker, start with, we met this, we met that, it come in, watch and see. You see the drawings, and with no approvals, just optics.
Yes, yes.
Promises, pictures, and PR, Madam Speaker. PPP. Promises, pictures, and PR, PPP.
Oh, my. I like
And now the words of the day, legacy issues, Madam Speaker, legacy issues. I say again, Madam Speaker, that they live in the past. Throughout this debate, they talk more about the past than the future. They came into office on the promise of a new day, but they have cut that short. The Bahamian people have seen through them, Madam Speaker. The Bahamian people see that they continue to talk about global lockdowns while the people are now living with letdowns, Madam Speaker, through this government. This is a government, Madam Speaker, of publicity and not performance. There's an execution gap in this government between what they say and what they do, Madam Speaker. This government is a one-trick pony when it comes to fiscal policies: tax and spend, tax and spend, tax and spend, spend and tax. This government will tax you, they will squeeze you, they will raid your business, find whatever opportunity to get blood out of stone, because they have no ideas. They only have one idea: squeeze as much from the Bahamian people and create policies that penalize you even more, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the fix was in early from the campaign trail. Their taxing and increased fees policy started with the great campaign promise that didn't have the fine print. Reduce VAT to 10%, take hundreds of millions of dollars out of the economy, but they needed to get it from somewhere. They got it from the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. They got it from the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, bait and switch. Bait and switch. You know, VAT down to 10%, but we can tax y'all like crazy, and we can increase government services and government fees like crazy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Bahamian people are extremely disappointed that this government continues not to have a balanced approach to the fiscal affairs of this country, Madam Speaker. Bahamians would feel less frustrated with the understandable sacrifices that are asked of them as citizens if the government was even-handed, measured, and diligent in their fiscal decisions. They understand, for example, that the solvency of the NIB is crucially important to their lives and future generations. But their issue is that knowing that the government should have been more caring, more concerned, knowing that, with not heaping taxes and fees on them so that Bahamians can adequately make way for the impact to their pockets that they find understandable. Because as you go out there, Madam Speaker, Bahamians will say, well, you know, we understand that NIB have to go up. We understand that. We understand that we have a country to develop and you need to give a little, right? You give a little. But they say the government is asking too much. So we've never said that there shouldn't be some taxes. That would be irresponsible for us. We've just said that the government continues to overtax and expect more from the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on this budget, just as a fiscal analysis, this government has fallen short. You've given up on your surplus target. Total revenue is behind projections. Total VAT collection is behind, and that's your biggest revenue generator. Your borrowing plan and debt management does not breed confidence. and fails in many respects the legal authorization test, Madam Speaker. Your own numbers show your economic growth plan is failing. Your issues are compounded by the fact, Madam Speaker, that along the way you did not follow certain requirements by law, even the ones you set for yourself that are there to ensure fiscal discipline. Madam Speaker, the Public Finance Management Act 2023. The government brought this. This is the government's bill. And in it, it talks, Madam Speaker, it talks about any deviation from what the government would have projected. There's a subsequent thing that must be done. It talks about if the deviation referred to in subsection 1 has not been cured prior to the mid-year review or the annual budget, the government shall outline in the mid-year review or the annual budget, as appropriate, the measures the government intends to take to return to compliance with the fiscal objectives. Their bill, piece of legislation, they're not willing to follow, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you still have not gotten this Parliament's authorization to borrow the excess of $131 million. You gave BPL $100 million from the consolidated fund when you are required to get approval from Parliament. You have not. Like the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker, we were hopeful that the government would finally get it. No real relief for businesses or the average Bahamian. No promised relief for the poor. The government has touted and bragged about saving the Bahamian economy, but they have squandered what was given to them, Madam Speaker. An economy that was roaring back from 14% growth under the F&M in 2021 when they came into office, to now they project an anemic 1.1% growth. And that's after they said, Madam Speaker, that they could achieve 5.5%. So they told the Bahamian people, we believe we're going to achieve this. But they had to revise it, Madam Speaker. They had to revise it, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, 2021, Free National Movement, 14% growth. PLP 2024 projects 1.1%. 1.1%, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, they started off ahead, and they squandered the opportunity that was given to them, Madam Speaker. They've not come to this Parliament with any kind of serious growth plan, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for free.
The member could have more dynamic posters, because if you start from 1 and you move to 2, that's 50% growth. But if you start from 10 and you move by 4, that's less growth than getting 1. And so when he talks about the growth rate in 2021 compared to 2020, he should know the Bahamian people remember what was done to them and what was done to their businesses in 2020. And so although he keeps talking about we looking at the past, when they come with this deceptive material, you have to remind the public 14% growth from when the competent authority had you locked down in your homes, your businesses closed early, all of that, 14% isn't impressive.
Prime Minister, I'm glad you're back here with us. I didn't know if you had a meeting, Prime Minister, right? I just want to go back. 2 paragraphs. I think is important. I just want you to know that we know that this is your administration, Prime Minister. This is the Davis administration. We had to correct some people because we hear this. I've been watching politics a long time, Prime Minister, right? And you've been wrong a long time. I heard of the Pinlin administration. I heard of the Ingram administration, the Christie administration, the Minnis administration. This political creature, where they say Davis Cooper. I don't get it, but some of your members, Prime Minister. No, your members, Prime Minister. But Prime Minister, we are fully aware, sir, that this is the Davis administration. So we just want you, we want you to know that our Prime Minister. Speaker, this budget highlights this government deficit spending, smoke and mirrors of various economic metrics, and utter silence on how they propose to fund government proposals. Madam Speaker, this government has been focusing on the primary balance, an attempt to paint a rosy picture of the fiscal health of the country. But in their classic look over there and bait and switch, it is an incomplete one as the primary balance does not include interest payments on debt, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the truth is, for all, Madam Speaker, of its big talk and attempts to be selective, the government is still running a deficit and still needs to borrow funds to sustain the budget, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, so the government promised the Bahamian people that they would see a surplus, more revenue, monies earned, than expenditure, money spent. They said that in February of 2023, Madam Speaker. They said the Bahamian people should see $287 million surplus, or equal to 1.9% of GDP in 2020, 24, 25, in this budget year. And 7 months later, they said, no, no, no. It's going to be 109 million, 0.7% of GDP. Now they're saying to us, Madam Speaker, see y'all next year as it relates to that surplus. Yep. We can see y'all next year on that, Madam Speaker. Oh, and by the way, in the meantime, we don't have a surplus for you. We want you to chew on this $16 million deficit in this budget. Madam Speaker, let's talk about this deficit, Madam Speaker. The government said that the target deficit would be $132 million over the first 9 months of the fiscal year and missed it by a mile, Madam Speaker. No, more than a mile, Madam Speaker, 214 million, because they've been spending like crazy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, spending, travel expenses, It's budgeted $181,000. This is in the office of the Prime Minister, and spent $1.5 million, Madam Speaker. 700% increase. Yes. 700% increase, Madam Speaker. Now, we've said before, we do know that the Prime Minister has to travel. Who would say that the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas shouldn't travel? As the leader of the opposition has said, we are, and the Bahamian people would question the large delegations that may not be necessary. 700% increase, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, consultants. This year, Madam Speaker, the government, this fiscal year we're about to go in, the government would have spent $220 million on consultants. $220 million at the end of this fiscal year coming. $220 million, not $2 million, not $20 million. $220 million this government would have spent at the end of the 24-25 fiscal year. $220 million, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, you know, I was so curious. I say, man, that's a lot of money, right? I say that's a lot of money, Madam Speaker. So I just decided to go through some items that the government purchased, and there's been, you know, public conversations about things that the government may have purchased. And, Madam Speaker, $220 million. So you could get a sense of what that money could do. $220 million, you could buy 11,000 police cars. You could buy 11,000 police cars with $220 million. Granted, the government just bought about 100. You could buy 11,000 police cars with $220 million. I'm sure the member for Freetown would say, we could use some of that money in national security. The member for Tall Pines just talked about the ambulances, the 14 that we're waiting on. 220 million could buy 1,375 ambulances. 1,375 ambulances. $220 million. 70 new clinics. I'm sure if the member for Tall Pines was here, he would say, sure, I could use some of that money. Madam Speaker, $220 million on consultants, Madam Speaker. Now, let's be clear, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let's be clear. We believe, and the member for Marco City has articulated this on a number of occasions, we believe that wherever we can use fellow Bahamians who have the required expertise and competencies to assist the central government, absolutely. So let's put that up front. But $220 million, Madam Speaker, and this year, the $76 million for consultants is an increase of $12 million from last year. And there was about already 148. that already made it 148, around 148, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, they continue to empty the pockets of the Bahamian people through taxing and increased fees on government services. But they make no significant sacrifices in cutting back spending. This budget does not address the high cost of living Bahamians are facing under this government, especially since the member for Cat Island, the Prime Minister, has acknowledged that the government's efforts to tackle inflation and bring Bahamians relief has failed. Madam Speaker, since we were dealing with this inflation, Madam Speaker, we were dealing with this issue, despite inflation, for a while. The member for Marco City called for temporary VAT breaks to assist with the inflation. See it right here. F&M called for temporary VAT breaks, among other things, as inflation rages. The Honorable Michael Pintard said the government should expand social welfare vouchers to qualifying Bahamian families that are targeted at support for food, rent, cooking, gas, care for children, and other key essentials. The government should stop its plan to add VAT to expenses covered by medical insurance. Other jurisdictions have taken these and other key steps to help their citizens, Madam Speaker. Yes, the Prime Minister did talk about how challenging it was, but in the end, what the government said is that we have not succeeded, Madam Speaker. Bahamians are still hurting, Madam Speaker. They're hoping for help from this government. What they did get from this government, Madam Speaker, is duty-free fire extinguishers, digital camera parts, laundry detergents in the form of dryer sheets. The struggling Bahamian family cannot eat fire extinguishers. They cannot eat digital camera parts, Madam Speaker. They cannot eat dryer sheets, Madam Speaker. Duty off of CMOS for health benefits. Wouldn't a more suitable and understandable adjustment on health policy would have been to take that of medicine, not take duty of CMOS for health benefits? $220 million on consultants, 700% increase in travel, Madam Speaker. The government is all over the place, no cohesive, clear economic policy. They're shooting from the hip. Little something here, little something there, but no big ideas for the long-term prosperity of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Over the hill, Madam Speaker. What about the people over the hill, Madam Speaker? What does this budget do for them? What vision has the government presented to transform the over-the-hill communities? What does the government have for the people for over the hill? What do they have for the poor? This government came into office talking about being a champion of the poor and that they would wage a war on poverty. But the first thing they did was put a food tax on items that greatly affect the poor and the least among us. And for those who say this notion of bread basket items having no taxes is an insult to the poor, they have no clue. Because if you go to mom and pop stores in over there and you stay there for a few hours and you watch the owners of those mom and pop stores as they stay at the back by the cash register. And how many 10 cents off of this? 'Cause I have 20 cents. They say, no problem. Right? 10 cents off of this. Mr. So-and-so, I ain't got the, no problem, 15 cents. So don't tell me that this don't affect the poor, and this wouldn't help the poor if you take VAT off of bread basket items, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government is not prepared to pay the price needed to significantly support the poor. They just want to pay them lip service, Madam Speaker. They promised additional programs to strengthen the safety social net, but nothing. Where is the significant increase in help for the poor in this budget? Or are the increases only for travel and consultants and not the poor? Madam Speaker, this government is not providing sufficient answers on crime, Madam Speaker. We had no issue, as I stated, when they were asking for a comprehensive plan on crime, as we are asking for now, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are in the middle of a 13% increase in murders. We are at 55 murders for the year. We've consistently said that the government must lead, and no one can blame the government for a murder. We have never said that. What we are saying is that we know that crime is multi-layered, multifaceted, but it requires leadership from the government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the budget communication, the entire document was 15,067 words. And there was one word on one time the word crime was used. 15,067 words. Crime was in there, the word once. 13% increase in crime, Madam Speaker, we are in the midst of. The government is not using the tools in the toolbox, Madam Speaker. The National Neighborhood Watch Council had 157 groups that included several family islands. It received international acclaim from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, held up, Madam Speaker, as a model for community policing around the world. But the government has allowed it to falter. Why? Why, Madam Speaker? The cars, computers, and resources are nowhere to be found, we understand, and the officers reassigned. Madam Speaker, we understand that there was a citizen who was willing to donate a community app, but the ministry has yet to introduce the program. Madam Speaker, urban renewal, and I want to thank Ms. Bannister and St. Barnabas Urban Renewal, who does a tremendous job, Madam Speaker. Right? But it's more an inner city crime prevention apparatus. The Neighborhood Watch Council allowed for a larger coverage around the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, PPPs. Now, Madam Speaker, it's interesting with these PPPs. Right? We believed, when we put out the policy paper, that a central component of the public-private partnership would ensure that there's some income, there's some profits, if you will, that the Bahamian people would be able to benefit from at the end of these PPPs, Madam Speaker. But what we are getting with the government does not meet the definition of PPP, as they are pretty much secret off-the-book loans, Madam Speaker. We don't know if the Bahamian people are getting value for money. Why no competitive bidding? We don't know the terms, the interest rate, the length of the loans. We don't know what liabilities are being created for the Bahamian people. On Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker, all this talk about loving Grand Bahama, but you haven't loved them enough to get the Grand Lucayan soul after making that bold promise. Between the Grand Bahama Promotion Board, Grand Bahama Beautification, and CoLab, who was budgeted $227,000, $400,000, and $3 million for a total of $3.6 million, you only use $345,000, 10%. Out of $3.6 million, you only use $345,000 for those programs, but yet you say you're committed and focused on Grand Bahama. And by the way, in the office of the Grand Bahama, you made sure to spend $1 million on an elevator in Grand Bahama. $1 million on an elevator, budgeted 3.6, but you only used 345,000. So, Madam Speaker, no, he's trying to distract me. Yeah. Well, Madam Speaker,
Recognize the honourable member for Freetown.
please pause that.
You know, when people say things flippantly, it's dangerous. Elevators are required by a law that the Parliament passed to make sure the disabled people have equal access to buildings. In fact, in this place, and this is why it surprises me, there was comment made when the member for Golden Gates had ambulatory issues. For people not to understand that people who cannot walk, who may be in wheelchairs, have the right to access the Ministry of Grand Bahama on all of its levels, is kind of disheartening, especially from a legislator.
Thank you, honourable member.
Madam Speaker, let me tell you what is disheartening from a legislator. That member is a part of a government that reallocated funds from the disabled, from the handicapped, the blind, and the deaf, but has the nerve to stand up.
Shame.
Right? No shame. Where was his voice when they decided to reallocate the money from the blind and the deaf? And you talking about the disabled?
Meek and mild.
Wow. That's what we're talking about, Madam Speaker. Don't watch what they say. Watch what they do. The member stood on his feet to call into question my support for the disabled by virtue of asking about $1 million elevator. But the government that he's a part of, he would have been right there when the government decided to reallocate monies from the blind, the deaf. My word. Wow.
The elevator, or you requesting the expensiveness of the elevator.
How much time I have? Please? No, you should say sorry to the disabled. You should say sorry. Madam Speaker, we've talked a great deal about, sorry?
Probably 20 minutes.
What, I got about 20 minutes? Huh? I just want to know where that. No, it can't be 2. It was about 15. I just trying to get a jump like that. No, it was about 15. Anyway, 15 minutes.
10%?
Madam Speaker, we have talked about the great deal, and the honourable member for Marcos City, who has been a real champion to his credit, a champion about food security, Madam Speaker. We've talked about the importance of food security. In that budget of $1.2 million, they only spent $200,000. So in the budget of $1.2 million for food security, they only spent $200,000. Why? They talked about the agriculture administrative cadet. They spent $0. Why? They talked about monies to develop national sport. $0 spent. The National Organ Transplant Program that was talked about in the last budget, approved $1.5 million, but you spent $0, Madam Speaker. Why? The Health and Wellness Program, Madam Speaker, you allocated $1.5, but you only spent $200,000, Madam Speaker. The Catastrophic Healthcare Program, Madam Speaker, that they said, Madam Speaker, obviously, with the great deal of non-communicable diseases that we have, unfortunately, in our country, Madam Speaker, but only $2 million out of that $10 million fund was used, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as it relates to small business development, Madam Speaker, they were allocated just under $2 million, but only $475,000 was spent, Madam Speaker. This is after the Prime Minister claimed that his government was committed to $50 million a year towards that end, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the government talks about being there for the least and the lost and the left behind, Madam Speaker. But the Bahamian people have determined that this government has just been about talks, Madam Speaker. Everywhere they turn, there's a government fee that is coming their way. And they have determined, Madam Speaker, that as much as the government talks about wanting to ensure their prosperity, Madam Speaker, that they are not serious, Madam Speaker. On consumer credit counseling, Madam Speaker, that this was talked about as an initiative to help inflation. $0 was spent, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to go back very quickly, Madam Speaker, to this issue of over the hill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, these historic communities that have ensured and cultivated some of the greatest minds in our country, the icons in all aspects of the development of our nation, political, educational, cultural, you name it, Madam Speaker. Why can't we finally, for those people over the hill, commit in a serious and significant way the weight of the government and its resources when you think about $220 million for consultants, as an example? Why can't we put our money where our mouth is as it relates to the people over the hill? The F&M had the Over the Hill initiative, and I know there are different criticisms of it, Madam Speaker, but what I do know, it was an incredible start. It was a good place to start. So even if the government came in and said, you know what, we got to twinkle with that little bit, recalibrate over here, do this. But to completely abandon the program or even abandon the concept, Madam Speaker, they could have called it something else. But to completely abandon the people over the hill, Madam Speaker, I think is wrong, Madam Speaker.
Yes, yes.
So we hope, for the short amount of time that the government has left, that they would come up with a program that we would be able to finish and to add on for the people of the historic over-the-hill communities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I prepare to take my seat, Madam Speaker, I did have a question for the member for Elizabeth, a road traffic question. And I've asked this before to the Prime Minister's credit, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. When I said it, this is my characterization, and if it's not, the Prime Minister can direct me. He was quite surprised when I talked about certain outlets not taking legal tender. I don't know if you remember that conversation, Prime Minister. Certain road traffic outlets only taking cards and not accepting legal tender. Legal tender. I think that my view is that every outlet should accept legal tender. It's a government service. This is not a private service. There are poor people who don't have an account to have a debit card to pay for their services.
That's right.
Some will never will. And that's not a judgment, it just is what it is. So how can we prevent poor people from going to a place that has a government service and not allow them to go in their pocket and pay for an important service like your driver's license or licensing your car? So it is something that I hope, Prime Minister, that you and your minister can revisit, sir, because I believe, one, I hear from my constituents all the time how challenging that is. Madam Speaker, I don't claim to have a monopoly on understanding the experience of poor people in this country, right? I'd never do that. But I have enough experience to say this. Madam Speaker, as you know, there are people every day, they trying to make $20. Like every day they hustling $20 to get something to eat. $20 to get something, and it starts again the next day. And it starts the next day again.
Yes, sir.
Where their shopping is not in a basket, it's not in a cart, their shopping is in their hands.
Yes.
And even sometimes when they come to the cash register, the 3 or 4 items that they have, they got to put it back. That's why I commend those stores, those mom and pop stores in particularly the over-the-hill areas who are staples of those communities. Yes. And you go in there, and they know they've grown up with these people. Maybe their parents owned the business, but now it's next down to the next generation. And as a matter of fact, the older lady who was coming in to do her shopping, know the owner of the store now, the son, from he was a little boy, because she used to come in there and talk to his parents. That is real. And I believe that every day that we are in here, every day that we are on the road, every day that we are driving around, yes, everybody's at a different station in life. And to change somebody's life, it might take a substantial contract, and that's their focus. But the reality of it is, to change some people's lives, it's how do you, as best as you can, create a system, create a country where that $20 living every day is not something that they should have to deal with. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. How do we move people upstream economically? How do we do that? That should be our focus, Madam Speaker. And so when we have our feeding programs, and the member for Barnabas talked about this, when we have our feeding programs that are vitally important, while we are doing that, we should be asking ourselves that these 500 people who came out here today, as an example, how many of them, we can move them upstream economically and change their lives in a significant way, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I continue to believe, as I'm sure we all do, and I don't qualify it, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the greatest country in the world. We are an incubator of talent and intellect, and I am proud, just like we all are, to be a citizen of this country. Sometimes, Madam Speaker, you'll be away for 2 weeks, and I always tell people, after about 2 weeks, I'm ready to come back home. Because there's no place like the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. No place like the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I hope, Madam Speaker, too, as I prepare to take my seat, I think about these members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. The government made a decision last year that as of July 1st, to not ensure the dependence of police officers, persons who would be joining the uniform branches. We had a big discussion about this. I believe it's something that needs to be revisited. I don't know if there could be a hybrid situation, but I believe that it was an injustice to those organizations. It was an injustice to take away those insurances, Madam Speaker. Well, we talked about this. The point is, $220 million on consultants. Right. This is the point. $220 million on consultants. But we have things we should be doing for the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force and other members of the uniformed services. That's what I'm saying. That's why the Bahamian people continue to believe that we don't have credibility. And when I say we, I mean all us, you know. Because every time we get a new government and we ask the Bahamian people for sacrifices, we ask them to go in their pockets and to give this and to give that, and they're being taxed, right? On one level, it's them ducking the pothole that they feel should be, that they know that their taxpayers' money should fix in time, right? On another level, how do we strengthen the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the other uniform branches? What sacrifices will we make? And it may involve, and I'm being naive with this, Madam Speaker, it may involve that we need to tell our supporters, you know, listen, there's some sacrifices that got to be made because we have a country to build, we have a country to develop in a way that we can move around where a government isn't about to spend $220 million on consultants, right? But police officers are hurting. I was talking with a retired police officer yesterday, and he was just talking about the challenges that even retired police officers have. So my point is that the government can continue to cheer itself on all it wants. There are real problems and real issues in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that this government has failed to address, and it continues, and that the Bahamian people who ultimately will decide on whether or not you've acquitted yourself well as a government, that the Bahamian people are deeply concerned about many things and about their lives and the challenges they face. And they are extremely disappointed, Madam Speaker, extremely disappointed in what they thought. We were all hopeful about what the new day would bring. We were all hopeful, Madam Speaker. But unfortunately, the Bahamian people feel that the New Day government has failed them. So we say again, Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, we have no issues with PLP supporters because they too are living under the bad decisions and the bad policies of this government. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.